Welcome to Season 2 of The Evolution of Torah, a podcast with JTS professor Rabbi Mordecai Schwartz. In this season, Establishing Rabbinic Culture, Professor Schwartz traces the development of medieval Jewish legal literature through a journey to 4 key centers of learning across North Africa and Europe. This is Episode 2, which takes us to Muslim Spain and North Africa.
The Academy in Kairouan, what is northern central Tunisia today, was the center of Jewish learning from the 9th to the 11th centuries. Those who lived under Islam had a methodology that highlighted the practical legal outcome of textual analysis of the Talmud, and they are treated as a separate unit. This is where we will begin. In today's episode of the podcast, we will cover Muslim Spain and North Africa. The commentary of Rabenu Hananel ben Hushiel, who died in 1055 or 1056, and was the son of the Rabenu Hushiel that we mentioned in the last podcast, is generally known to those who study the Talmud as Rabenu Hananel. And his commentary on the Talmud is the earliest known that has survived in its entirety. According to the legend of the 4 captives, Rabenu Hananel's father, Rabenu Hushiel, was one of the 4 scholars ransomed, having come from southern Italy. He was rescued by the community of Kairouan. He headed the academy there, and his son, Rabenu Hananel, was likely born there. Upon Rabenu Hushiel's death, Rabenu Hananel inherited his father's position. Rabenu Hananel's commentary covers the Talmudic orders of Moed, which deals with Shabbat and holidays, Nashim, which addresses laws of marriage and divorce, and Nizikin, which handles torts and damages. A few separate tractates that have practical relevance, Brachot, about prayers and blessings, and Chulin, on the ritual slaughter of animals for consumption, and what we call today kashrut, dietary laws. All of his commentaries are in our possession. Rabenu Hananel's commentary was known for centuries solely through quotations in the writings of others, and made its way onto the standard printed page of the Talmud only in the 19th century. Thousands of fragments of Rabenu Hananel's commentary were found in the Cairo Geniza, and that attests to the commentary's popularity at the time. There were a few other important Talmud commentaries in the period, but we have very little of them. The most famous of these other commentaries was written by Rabenu Shmuel HaNagid, and we do have some small portions of it. Rabbi Shmuel HaNagid, who lived in Spain, in Granada, really deserves his own full podcast. He was the vizier of Granada under 2 Berber kings and led a series of successful military campaigns on their behalf. We have many of his letters. He is supposed to have written a full commentary on the Talmud, but it exists only in a fragmentary form and is seemingly focused on giving interpretations only to specific, challenging Talmudic passages. And while Shmuel HaNagid's students may have written a commentary to most of the Talmud, we don't have any of it, and it is only known from citations and lists of books found in the Cairo Geniza. Having said that, the truth of the matter is that despite the popularity of Rabenu Hananel's commentary during his lifetime and shortly after, within 2 generations, his commentary was superseded by the incredibly important figure, Rabbi Isaac Alfasi, who put an end to the period of the Gaonim and began the period of the Rishonim. Now, I want to thank my student, current rabbinical student Ruben Yolen, for preparing much of the next section on Rabbi Alfasi. I'm going to refer to Rabbi Alfasi through the whole section here, both as Rabbi Alfasi sometimes, and other times I'll use his traditional appellation, which is the Rif. Based in Rabbi Avraham ibn Daud's Sefer HaKabbalah, scholars came to the consensus that the Rif was born in 1013. After a series of conflicts in North Africa, he went to Spain at the age of 75 in 1088, where there he became the head of the yeshiva in Lucena and died in 1103, a very advanced age for the period. There is a debate over the place of his birth. Many Rishonim describe him as being from Fez. There are scholars today who favor the position that this is a mistake based on his name, which is Alfasi, and that it's really just a family name. He's actually called Ibn Alfasi, the son of the one from Fez in many places. Ibn Daud and others describe him as being from Kalat Hamad, which is in present-day Algeria. Although Ibn Daud names Rabenu Hananel as one of the Rif's teachers, there is doubt as to the truth of this claim, because in his great work, which we will shortly discuss, he does not cite him with the honorifics that you would expect from a student talking about their teacher. I'm going to give you an overview of the Rif's great work, the Halachot. The Rif follows the order of the Talmud, and he keeps much of the original language in the Talmud. It's really a shortening or an abridgment of the Talmud. And he includes only those sections of the Talmud that he deems relevant in post-temple times. Often, when people first encounter the halachot of the Rif, they think what they're looking at is a page of the Talmud. It has much of the same language, and even in the printed editions, it's set up in a way with the commentaries around it that makes it look a lot like the Talmud. Last season, I talked about a Gaonic code called Halachot Gedolot, which is also an abridgment of the Talmud, but it's a different kind of abridgment. It really only includes rulings. That's not what the Rif does. The Rif gives you the parts of the Talmud necessary to understand the basis of the legal decision. So he'll include some of the back and forth in the Talmud in a particular section so you can see why it is that he's making his decision. He includes frequent discussions of his methodology when it leads him to disagree, for instance, with Rabenu Hananel or other predecessors of his. You might hear in traditional circles that Alfasi does not include any narrative material in his work, no Agadah. But this is not true. The Rif actually does include Agadic sources, narrative sources, when he wants to encourage his reader to adopt certain kinds of admirable character traits or to behave in a certain way that doesn't necessarily have a halachic basis, but that he thinks is a good way to behave. The halachot draw heavily from Rabenu Hananel's Talmud commentary. Although the Rif cites him anonymously more often than he does not, he also includes material by name or without mention from Gaonic works, as well as Gaonic responsa and other commentaries. From the structure of the halachot and the sources it brings, it's clear that the main purpose of the work is to provide legal decisions and also to demonstrate how to arrive at those decisions. To that end, the Rif created a methodology that was partially based on the Gaonic approach to the Talmud, but was also original. Let's talk about the Rif's methodology. Rabenu Hananel often defers to the decisions of post-Talmudic authorities, Gaonim, explicitly stating that he does not have the authority to override them. The Rif relies on his own analysis of the text, even if it leads him to contradict what the Gaonim said. This presupposes an assumption that the Talmud is universally authoritative, but post-Talmudic authorities are not. And using one's own powers of reason to analyze the text is ultimately the best method to reach a true understanding of Torah and mitzvot. In his analysis of the text, the Rif relies on close readings of the Talmud, his own logical reasoning, and the proper application of principles of adjudication. He tends to follow the plain meaning, or what we call pshat, of the Talmud, and rejects qualifications, really impositional interpretations, okimtaot, on a given statement within the text, unless he thinks that they're rooted in the language of the text, even when the qualification of an apparent contradiction is necessary. What I mean by that he'll accept a passage that is contradictory rather than trying to interpret that contradiction out of existence. He seeks to root it in the language of the text, and he rejects qualifications and impositional interpretations of his predecessors that aren't rooted there. For instance, the Talmud on Brachot 48a says that you can include a child in the grace after meals, the invitation to the grace after meals, as long as they understand to whom the blessing is being said, that is to say, to God. The Gaonim restrict this. They say that only a child over the age of 13 can be included in that ritual. But the Rif concludes that since the language of the Talmud permits any child to do so, so long as they understand who the blessing is being said to, that means any child of any age can be included in the ritual, so long as they understand who the blessing is intended to go to. Let's talk about some of his influence, because the Rif had a great deal of influence. Of Alfasi's many students, the most prominent is probably Rabbi Yosef Halevi ibn Migash, who we traditionally call Ri Migash. He became his successor and took over the yeshiva at Lucena. Now, the Ri Migash taught someone named Maimon, Rabbi Maimon ben Yosef. That name Maimon might be familiar to you because he's the father of the Rambam, of Maimonides. In the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam's great code, he quotes Alfasi anonymously, stating Alfasi and Ibn Migash's opinions with the words, "My teachers have decided." Now, there's no direct source confirming Ibn Migash as Maimonides' teacher, but he certainly was Maimonides' father's teacher. By the second third of the 12th century, the halachot of Alfasi had become the basis upon which halakha was studied throughout the countries along the Mediterranean coast. Toward the mid-13th century, authorities in Germany and France recognized the Rif as an authority. The Rosh composed his own halachot based on Alfasi's halachot. Rabbi Yosef Karo made Rabbi Alfasi, the Rif, one of the three pillars in his decisions that he eventually would include in the Shulchan Aruch. Therefore, the halachot really is the link between the works of the Gaonim and those of the Rishonim. I have focused today on the two most important rabbis of North Africa and Spain leading up to Maimonides, Rabenu Hananel, and the Rif, Yitzchak Alfasi. In the next episode, we'll deal with France in the Middle Ages. I didn't cover the Rambam Maimonides in this episode. I will cover Maimonides in the 4th episode of the podcast, which will be an episode dedicated only to him and to his works.
Thanks for listening to The Evolution of Torah with Professor Mordecai Schwartz. It was recorded at JTS by Christopher Hickey and produced by Ellie Gettinger, with editing assistance from Sarah Brown. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. For those who want to dig a little deeper, visit jtsa.edu/podcasts, where you'll find sources, archival material, and more in the Evolution of Torah show notes, along with links to all of JTS's podcasts, exploring Jewish text, history, culture, and experience.